I'm Don Pfister, and I'm here with Meredith Blackwell, and we're doing an oral history. And today we have Rabern, and Rabern is going to tell us a little bit about how he got into mycology and some of his projects. So
how did I get in?
Where'd you grow up?
We'll start early.
I'll start from the beginning.
Yeah.
I was born in Big Stone Gap, Virginia, and I studied at the University of Virginia's College at Wise. It's the only branch of the UVA, and it's in Wise County in far southwestern Virginia, about 15 minutes from my hometown. Both of my parents graduated from there before it was truly affiliated. It was always affiliated with the University of Virginia, but previously it had been Clinch Valley College. But eventually UVA decided that they wanted to recognize their hillbilly cousins off in the mountains, and we were recognized as their college at Wise. I started there with the intention of becoming a veterinarian, but it's there that I actually met Kevin Jones, who was a postdoc in your lab. And with him, I started working with fungal pathogens of slime molds and started to isolate fungi and to go out into the field and find these interesting slime molds and their associated fungi. And that was a project that I did right after I graduated, for a paid position for $3,000 over 3 months, and I thought that was more than I had made in a full year of working at the vet's office.
And somebody paid you
to go out in the forest
and
and collect these little fruiting buddies that were covered in white fuzz. And I thought,
who paid you? Was Kevin?
It was through the Fellowship in the Natural Sciences program, the FINS program, at the University of Virginia, and he had a project going that summer. So 3 months of a project over the summer turned into the additional fall semester as volunteer work. And it was...
We call it research.
Yeah. It was eventually at that time that Kevin said, you've got to get out of here. You've got to find a job. And he showed me at that time still a paper issue of Inoculum, in which there was a call from this woman at the University of Maine saying that she needed somebody to study Kittredge systematics. And I asked him, well, what's a Kittredge? And he said, it's not important, just apply for the job. So I wrote this woman, Joyce Longcore, a letter saying that I was very interested in working with Kittredges, and actually I'd been very interested in Kittredges all along, and like, whatever I needed to say.
Since I found out what they were.
Yeah, I had not had any mycology courses. I'd taken, Kevin Jones taught symbiosis, and we had talked a little bit about the Attine ants and their fungal gardens, and I was very interested in like Escovopsis, and I actually did a couple of senior projects, senior reports essentially on the topic. So I had some inkling of what I was doing, but definitely with the Kittredges being just an entirely unique group unto themselves, I had no idea what I was getting into. And shortly after that, I moved to Maine and started my master's program with Joyce, describing a new order, which was fun, right?
Which one?
The Lobulomycetales,
Okay.
and which apparently is a rather hot topic, at least at this meeting. And from there, for my PhD, I worked on a group of the Spizellomycetales. The Spizellomycetales named after Fred Sparrow.
By way of a British name, or a name for the English sparrow.
Right, for the Latin name for the Latin name for the genus for sparrow.
Yeah.
And I worked on a family of the Spizellomycetales, and our department chair was like, "Oh, that's a big step down from an order to now working on a family for your PhD." But I did that, and we started looking at different substrates, particularly horse and muskoxen manure, and various types of manure for these Spizellomycetales members. I finished my PhD in 2012.
And did that order hold up?
The Spizella myceliales? Oh, definitely. Yeah,
Okay,
it's
so it is
still
a
going
bit
strong.
older.
Yes.
Okay.
And then on graduation day, I really didn't know what I was doing come the next day. But I was approached by the department chair, who was an entomologist looking at invasive European red fire ants. And she had come across a new species of Hersitella that was parasitizing the European red fire ants that she was bringing back from Acadia National Park, where there were a big concern for tourists that didn't want to get and she hired me with the knowledge that I had a knack for naming new species, and she had a new species that needed a name. So for 1 year worked with her to name the new species. We sent off our paper for publication, and we were told that Hersitella as a genus should no longer exist. It should all be transitioned to Ophiocordyceps. And there wasn't really that much known about Ophiocordyceps in order to name a new species. So we then went about writing a grant proposal to work on Ophiocordyceps in conjunction with the RCEF collection. And with that, we published I think it may still be kind of the largest comprehensive phylogeny of Ophiocordyceps. Let's see, am I done? I'll keep going. I just wanted to check if there were questions yet.
So you jumped from Kittredge to Hypochondria.
Yeah, and then from there, some people at the University of Florida had heard of me, and I'd heard that they were also looking for people to name new species of Embrasure beetle fungi. And I started working at the University of Florida in the forest entomology branch of the department, and we, through traveling to Taiwan and South Africa, we came across, I think, 5 or 6 or 7 new species of Raphelia that we named from these Embrasure beetles, both in Taiwan and in Florida. From there, we had actually found a basidiomycete that was growing in association with the Embrasure beetles in Florida, and at the same time, our colleague in China had isolated that the same fungus from presumably where it was had originated and had been transported by these invasive beetles, or some beetles that had been here for a while, but some recent introductions is what they like to call them instead of invasives.
So did you name that one?
I named that one Flavidon ambrosius, which was actually turned out to be a polypore. And that one's going on for some interesting publications. So that, I don't know if eventually that may be my most cited species, some basidiomycete that I just kind of stumbled into, really.
And so the beetle, what was it?
Oh gosh.
Was it a native beetle?
It was a beetle that had been recently introduced.
Okay, so that makes better sense. I got it mixed up.
It had arrived in the 60s, I believe. But so it had definitely established itself. But there were some papers from the 60s saying that it had at one time been noticed in China, but nobody had really truly well documented it. And it wasn't until that we found it in Florida on that same beetle. Actually, one of the students had just set up a bait outside of his apartment window. A beetle had stumbled upon the bait, and he brought it in, and he was able to isolate it, and together we were able to determine what it was molecularly and morphologically, and we described the species together.
Yeah, I think a lot of things get introduced in their homeland. They're not known, and they have to come over here and cause symptoms.
Right.
Then we know that there's something there.
And this one's a very interesting species because, for the most part, for the Embrasure beetles, they burrow in to whatever host they have. They undergo really just one life cycle. They lay their eggs, and the eggs hatch, and the new brood fly away to another tree. This particular fungus, because it is a polypore that sticks around for a while, allows for the new brood, whereas the parent had previously kind of eaten away all of the fungus and there was nothing left, so the the new brood took away some inocula and grew their own gardens. In these cases with Flavodon, there's still plenty to go around. So actually the new brood are there and just decide, well, I'm going to have my family here. So you have these logs in Florida and also West Virginia and other places where you see multiple generations going of the beetles in a single log, and it's because they're allowed to do so. Because
millennial beetles.
Do they interbreed the different generations?
I don't think so. They are kind of an incestuous bunch, I believe, with the males. Like a single male would hatch and would fertilize the sisters, and they would go out and start the new populations.
So then how do you get to Michigan from Florida?
So I got to Michigan to get back to the Kittredges. I had heard that there was a position opening up with Tim James. I had originally collaborated with Tim back in my PhD, or my master's, when I started with Joyce in 2004. She recognized that she wasn't necessarily the best person to teach me molecular techniques. I still distinctly remember showing her how to use a micropipettor. And she sent me to study in Redis's lab at Duke University. Redis was on sabbatical. Tim was in charge. So I was taught by Tim James while he was there. I was there for a month, and he was definitely, just from his previous collaborations with Joyce, was kind of the molecular Kittredge king at the time. So he had gotten the position at the University of Michigan a few years previous to my, or a long time previous to my introduction to Michigan. And I remember when he got that position, Joyce thought the Kittredges were coming home.
Yeah, no, that's true.
And it actually got cried a little bit about that. That things were coming back, and like everything, where Joyce had started in Michigan working with Sparrow, that Tim was going back to Sparrow's home stomping grounds and rekindling the fire of Kittredge research. So to be part of that was really an honor. And we knew that Joyce will keep on isolating until it's completely impossible to do so, and that's not in any time soon. But she has recognized in the past years that liquid nitrogen dewar gets a little bit heavier each week to manually pour liquid nitrogen into these 5 or so dewars that she was keeping the cryopreserved Kittredge culture collection. And at this point, it reached around 650 isolates that she was taking care of, that she had either isolated herself or that she'd received it through collaborations with people specifically looking at the frog pathogen Batrachochytrium dendrobatidis. So she was looking for a home for those cultures. Tim was at the University of Michigan. There's a cryopreservation unit as part of the Herbarium there in Michigan, and we talked to them and prepared a grant proposal through the NSF Collections and Supportive Biological Research Program to move Joyce's collection from Maine to the University of Michigan. We thought it was going to be a rather easy process. I even was thinking, like, I'll just drive up there, and I've got a Subaru out back, and we'll load it up, and I'll drive back, and we'll be done with it. And then we started looking into the transportation of liquid nitrogen across state lines, and certain other regulations like that. So we were able to use some dry shippers, some liquid nitrogen cooled dry shippers, and I think through 7 shipments of approximately 90 isolates each, we were able to bring her entire collection to the University of Michigan and resort everything and put it into their automatically filling system, so we don't have to worry about lifting those heavy dewars anymore. Through my experience with her notes, I was able to build a database in Access and take all of her Excel sheets, which were pretty good for the most part, and some of her hand notes that maybe were localities that didn't exist or the names had changed or something, or I just knew exactly, like that certain letter abbreviation, I knew what it meant.
Sure.
She knew what it meant, but anyone else wasn't entirely sure if that was even in the state of Maine. But we took all of her collection, recharacterized it, and now it's at the University of Michigan in what we call the Cesium, the Collection of Zoosporic Eufungi at the University of Michigan. And that website is currently up and available, and if anyone wants to, this is my plug part of the interview.
Go right ahead.
Where we have Joyce's collection, the JEL collection, approximately 625 isolates. And once we moved her collection, Martha Powell at the University of Alabama, who just recently retired this past year, who was always the rival culture collection of Joyce's culture collection, the friendly competition. She wanted to make sure that her collection was also being held somewhere safe and cryopreserved. Luckily, they did not have their collection in liquid nitrogen. Their collection was just at ultra low, like minus 80 degrees. So I did drive down from Ann Arbor to Tuscaloosa. I took my big cooler. We, 7 a.m., loaded up the cooler, put some dry ice in there, and I just booked it back to Ann Arbor, observing the speed limit, doing everything safe, cracking the windows a little bit so I could, I wasn't going to pass out along the way. And I remember pulling into the Herbarium parking lot that night, 10 o'clock, no one else was really around, and taking the cooler out. And I have a blankets lining the back of my car, and I took out the cooler, and the blanket came with it. It had frozen to the bottom of the cooler. It was so cold. But everything was immediately put into the liquid nitrogen, and we've just now started to go through those collections as well. And really our goal is to, of course, maintain these stocks so that they have somewhere, so these cultures, so that they have somewhere to be held safely, so especially since we possess a little bit over 50 X-type cultures. We also are in the process of checking everything for viability. In the cases where they are viable, we are restocking them. So optimally, we have 5 replicates of any particular culture so that we have plenty of material to work with before we have to worry about restocking again. And we are doing some DNA extractions since we have them thawed out along the way. And from those, we've just started to characterize molecularly the isolates for which we have absolutely no knowledge really of what's truly held in these collections, especially the JL collection. From my personal experience sitting watching Joyce at the microscope, this is the woman who has some of the most extensive knowledge of these organisms and has really kind of seen it all, and she's looking at under the microscope and she'll say, I think this one is probably in this order. But beyond that,
we talked to her yesterday, and I was astounded when she told us.
Well, she said there's so much more to do. There's
so
much more to find
definitely.
out.
So we have some things to order. We expect, but we really don't know what we hold there. So we have so far. We've done DNA extractions for nearly half of the totality of the 1,125 some cultures. But we have amplified 180 of those using the MinION nanopore technology, where we amplify a 4.5 to 6,000 base pair region of the rDNA operon, all the way from 18S through to the 28S. So essentially, at least for us, that's kind of like 3 separate genes and several reactions worth to get that kind of information in the past. And now we can prepare our amplifications with barcodes, apply the sample to the MinION, run it for approximately 2.5 hours to get about 3,000 reads per sample. And from that, we can do the processing the next day. And at the end of 48 hours, we have potentially 96 new sequences that we've never had before.
So you're going through the whole collection, so it'll be
optimally, yes.
Like under 10.
Oh, well,
under 10 plates if you can do it if they all come out. It'll be under 10 plates. You'll have them all.
Under 10 plates, I'm sorry.
Well, 96 well plates.
No, we're using with the barcoded primers.
Oh, okay.
We
Okay.
just do the amplifications and then pull them all together,
Okay, I
and then
see
we
what you're
can
doing.
demultiplex
Okay,
later.
so I want to ask you something. Were you on the Peak Project?
I was.
Okay.
I am the product of a partnership for enhancing expertise in taxonomy.
Great.
And that again is why I'm so honored and pleased to be getting back to the Kittredges.
Yeah.
Because I feel like that's
And that's
truly what I've
helped
been.
train you.
Yes, that's what I've been preparing to do. And when I have had these side projects at the University of Maine or the University of Florida, they've been fun, and I've definitely gained something from them. But there was that just nagging bit of guilt saying, like, you were trained for Kittredges, you need to get back there.
This was one of these perfect examples of that program, though,
Yeah.
because it was really down to 2-3 people.
Yeah,
in the
whose
US.
collections we now have.
And,
And not that many more in the whole world.
Not
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
There are some select groups that are looking at very interesting, like Mycological and these sorts of individuals. And there are some people in Europe that I'm being made aware of through our most recent collaborations. But definitely we're trying to make the University of Michigan kind of the hub for Kittredge research.
back.
Yeah.
So who's financing the collection now? Is NSF putting any support in?
We do currently have a couple of grants that
So you got the one to move the collection.
We got the one
and
to
then-
move. We got the one to move Joyce's collection. We're currently working off the one to move the collection from the University of Alabama, and we also have another that is helping us to actually grow
Right.
the collection, but with the addition of new cultures that we're.
the maintenance, the facility.
Yeah, that's
The facility is really part of the Herbarium at the University of Michigan, so it's not something that we're really putting the money into ourselves. Really, the overhead for the storage is already in place.
It's
So
the infrastructure.
yeah,
there.
the infrastructure is already there, so that's really helpful for this
Yeah.
because otherwise, I mean, Joyce was really getting all of her liquid nitrogen, all of her resources from soft money. She has a position at the University of Maine, as she probably already told you, but her salary was essentially $1 just so that they could keep her on the payroll so that they remembered to give her a parking permit.
after retirement, I hope. Or has it been all along?
It's been all along. She often says, like, she doesn't have a job from which to retire. She hasn't retired because she can't. Like, she's doing this because she loves doing this.
Margaret Barr could not be hired at first at Massachusetts, because her husband was on the faculty at the time. So is it that kind of thing, or they just didn't have a position for her?
They just really, I mean, she was just this crazy old lady isolating these fungi over in the closet. I mean, she worked for some phycologists and some other people on campus from time to time, but really it was a collaboration that got her back in the. I mean, she got her master's degree. She worked off and on for DuPont and other companies, kind of really just following her. She'll admit, following her husband around from position to position, and she says that she was a housewife for 20 years, and one day just went back to it and realized, oh yeah, this is what I like doing. I like sitting at the microscope and looking for these organisms.
You're paralleling so well what she told us.
I'm very indoctrinated. Like,
you are, but
I was in Maine for 9.5 years, so I definitely feel like she was the best person at my wedding 2 years ago. I immediately left this meeting on Wednesday. I got married on the following Saturday in 2017. So she's an integral part of my life.
Yeah, and I misunderstood. I thought she'd retired and then was in this position.
No.
So tell me, you're back home at the home of the Kittredges in Michigan. What is the Sparrow legacy at Michigan? You know, he was of the era of morphology and not really much culture, baiting cultures and studying things that way.
Yeah.
Are there materials? Are there things that you can use?
There are some materials in the herbarium. We have a lot of his original notes. We have a lot of his original slides.
What about the library? Is it full of Kittredge literature?
We do have a good
The
substantial amount of Kittredge literature, and a lot of us will bid in all these sort of auctions whenever we see something come up that's of particular interest. But yes, we have a lot of Sparrow's materials, especially like Physoderma, things that people haven't really investigated since his work. And in some cases, I remember one of his notebooks. I can't remember the direct quote, but it's essentially saying, like, in the hands of someone who really knows what they're doing, these materials can be revitalized and studied. So for those that are particularly interested, the materials are there.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Can they be revitalized?
Perhaps in the hands of those that know what they're doing. It may be.
Maybe that's you.
Between Tim and Joyce and myself, we may have a shot.
Yeah. Interesting.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, I guess you're always looking for the future, or are you able to stay at Michigan longer?
We just received this grant for another 3 years. I myself can only stay for another 2.5. And yeah, there's always that, still looking to the future. Of course, with Joyce's mentoring, a lot of people have always said, well, you'll just take over for her when she retires. And again, I reiterate, she both cannot retire and she does not have a job for me to take. I would like to work for more than $1.
Well, she should tell them they owe her, because I'm sure she's brought more recognition to that university than any of the other faculty.
She definitely has. But
so they owe her.
They do.
Creative position.
Yeah. So we'll see how things continue with the cesium, and perhaps there's some sort of curatorial position to be had there. But yeah, I've spent the better part of 4 or 5 years trying to get back to the Kittredges, and now I'm back, and I don't want to leave again.
Yeah, I understand. I understand. We discover our groups and we find our groups, and we want to keep with it. Yeah.
So we've interviewed you. Earlier we interviewed Tim James, that you're working with, and we interviewed Joyce, and we've talked about, with all of you, Sparrow. and so we've got a large number of people that were involved in some of the Kittredge studies. And so we're going to have to find someone to interview Martha Powell. She didn't come to the meeting.
Yeah.
She's moving right now.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, so, but anyway.
That would round it out very nicely.
Yeah, I of course, I personally never had the opportunity to meet Sparrow, but I feel like I've heard plenty of the stories, and actually in Joyce's lab in Maine, there's a picture that she used to have of pre-Longcore Griffin, Joyce Griffin, sitting at the microscope in attire that we would never see Joyce in now, a full skirt all the way down and a blouse, sitting at the microscope and looking at the camera, and the way she tells it was Sparrow said, "Hey Joyce," and she turned and instantly just gave this horrible stink eye, and like, how dare you take a picture of me in this fashion, and took a snapshot. So
well, he was probably wearing a coat and tie.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, from all the pictures I've seen of him sampling out in the field from these cores, and we have Joyce in her classic denim t-shirt or button-up shirt and work pants, and Sparrow in something somewhat formal looking for a boat trip.
That I took him out in Florida on kind of a boardwalk in a swampy area to collect sphagnum, and he got mud splashed all over his pristine pants.
And it's definitely odd for as much work as he did up at the University of Michigan Biological Station.
Yeah,
which
I knew him from there.
Yeah, which we're actually planning, as part of the most recent grant that we received. We're planning a Kittredge workshop of some sort in 2020, and it will be at the Biological Station. So definitely his legacy is continued there. That we have all of this wealth of his literature, and his notes saying, like, in the 50s or 60s or 70s, that he found these particular Kittredges at these particular locations at this particular time, and we hope to go back to the biological station and to take, he had the benefit of having multiple undergraduate students and graduate students to take with him and to have them constantly working, whereas there's maybe 10 of us at best when we go up there to sample. So we're hoping these workshops will lead to something more.
He did the course every summer.
Yeah.
I was up there for the course, but it was the summer that he was director of the station.
For nearly a decade or maybe
it was
more.
Bob Patterson who was teaching
yeah.
them. But you know, we'd all go out and we'd collect, we'd bait, we'd identify. You know, people would look. Bob Patterson would have him come over to the lab, have a look at this. You know, see what they found. So there's a wealth of information.
Yeah, and there is the Fred Sparrow building at the biological station.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much.
Yes,
It was
thank
nice
you.
to
Sure.
get the youngest perspective on all of this Kittredge
No.
work.
The
and
youngest,
to hear
oh.
about the collection.
Yeah.
Yeah, you had a poster here.
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
We really bringing. This is the first kind of public. The website just became live last week, and this is the first kind of public advertising for the cesium.
Yeah. Great.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks a lot.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you.